The modern diet is a fascinating and sometimes alarming landscape. We are surrounded by foods that are convenient, palatable, and engineered to be incredibly appealing. Among these, the classic ground meat patty served in a bun stands as a global staple. But what happens when this occasional treat becomes a daily ritual? Understanding the physiological consequences of consuming such a meal every day for a month is not merely an academic exercise. It is a crucial exploration into the foundations of our health. This journey into the body's response offers a powerful lesson in metabolic health, cardiovascular science, and the delicate balance of our internal systems. Examining this specific dietary pattern allows us to isolate the effects of a meal high in saturated fats, sodium, and refined carbohydrates. While a single instance of indulgence has minimal long-term impact, relentless daily exposure pushes the body's regulatory systems to their limits. The story that unfolds over 30 days is one of adaptation, strain, and, ultimately, the clear manifestation of health risks that public health experts have warned about for decades. The journey begins with the very first bite. On day one, the body's metabolic machinery springs into action to process the meal. A standard burger, typically rich in fat and refined carbohydrates, triggers a rapid and pronounced physiological response. The simple sugars from the white flour bun are quickly absorbed into the bloodstream, causing a sharp spike in blood glucose levels. In response, the pancreas releases a surge of insulin, the hormone responsible for ushering glucose out of the blood and into cells for energy. Simultaneously, the digestive system must contend with a significant load of saturated fat from the ground meat. This fat enters the bloodstream as triglycerides. Studies published in journals like the Journal of the American College of Cardiology have shown that a single high-fat meal can temporarily impair the function of the endothelium. After 7 consecutive days, the daily cycle of blood sugar spikes and subsequent insulin surges starts to take a toll. The body's cells, particularly in the muscles and liver, are repeatedly bombarded with insulin. This can lead to the very beginnings of insulin resistance, a condition where cells become less responsive to the hormone signals. As a result, the pancreas is forced to work harder, producing even more insulin to keep blood sugar levels in check. The cardiovascular system also shows early signs of persistent strain. The daily impairment of endothelial function is no longer just a temporary, hours-long event. Furthermore, the constant high sodium intake begins to overwhelm the kidney's ability to regulate fluid balance effectively. For many individuals, this leads to a measurable increase in their baseline blood pressure readings. Internally, the liver is working overtime. A daily influx of high levels of fat and fructose places it under considerable duress, and some of these fats can begin to accumulate within the liver cells themselves. Perhaps one of the most immediate changes occurs within the gut. The gut microbiome is highly sensitive to diet, and a diet high in saturated fat and low in fiber can alter the composition of gut bacteria unfavorably. By the end of the second week, the health markers that showed minor changes in week 1 now begin to display more significant and concerning trends. Blood tests would likely reveal a notable increase in levels of low-density lipoprotein cholesterol, often referred to as bad cholesterol. The high intake of saturated and in some cases trans fats directly stimulates the liver to produce more LDL particles. These particles are responsible for transporting cholesterol to the arteries. The strain on blood pressure regulation intensifies. 2 weeks of consistently high sodium intake has led to sustained fluid retention, forcing the heart to pump harder. At this stage, many individuals would see their resting blood pressure climb into the pre-hypertension range. The Framingham Heart Study has unequivocally linked such increases to a higher risk of heart attack and stroke. Beyond cholesterol and blood pressure, the overall inflammatory state of the body continues to rise. The altered gut microbiome may be contributing to leaky gut, allowing bacterial components to leak into the bloodstream. This chronic, low-grade inflammation, measured by rising levels of C-reactive protein in the blood, is a key driver of many chronic diseases, acting as a silent catalyst. Psychologically and physiologically, the body's energy regulation systems may also start to falter. The constant cycle of blood sugar spikes and crashes can lead to feelings of fatigue and persistent hunger. This creates a vicious cycle where the diet itself promotes cravings for the very foods causing the metabolic disruption. The body's natural appetite-regulating hormones can become dysregulated. Entering the third week, the focus shifts pointedly towards the liver, an organ that has been silently bearing a heavy burden. The process of fat accumulation that began in week 1 has now had time to progress significantly. With the daily, unrelenting supply of excess fats and sugars, the liver's capacity to process and export fat as triglycerides becomes overwhelmed. As a result, fat droplets accumulate inside the liver cells, a condition known as steatosis. This is the hallmark of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or NAFLD. While a formal diagnosis requires imaging or biopsy, blood tests at this stage would likely show elevated levels of liver enzymes indicating liver cell stress and damage. This fat accumulation is not a benign event, it is an active disease process. The presence of excess fat within the liver triggers an inflammatory response within the organ itself. By the end of the 4th week, the cumulative assault on the gut microbiome has resulted in a dysbiotic state, a significant imbalance in the microbial community. The near-total absence of dietary fiber has starved out many protective species. In their place, microbes that thrive on fat and simple sugars have flourished, producing metabolites that are detrimental to health. For example, some gut bacteria metabolize components of red meat, like choline and L-carnitine, into trimethylamine, or TMA, which the liver converts to TMAO. High levels of TMAO are linked to increased risk of atherosclerosis, heart attack, and stroke. This altered microbial ecosystem affects the integrity of the gut barrier. Beneficial bacteria help maintain the intestinal lining and strengthen tight junctions. With their numbers diminished, the gut lining becomes more permeable, a condition often referred to as leaky gut. This allows inflammatory molecules and bacterial fragments like LPS to pass into the bloodstream more easily, placing the immune system on high alert and fueling chronic systemic inflammation. The consequences extend beyond physical health to mental well-being. The gut-brain axis is a well-established bidirectional communication pathway, and the gut microbiome produces hundreds of neurochemicals that the brain uses. Finally, a compromised gut microbiome impairs nutrient synthesis and absorption. This creates a paradox where a person can be overfed in calories yet undernourished in essential vitamins and minerals. Over the 30-day period, one of the most pervasive and damaging outcomes is the establishment of chronic, low-grade inflammation. This is not acute, helpful inflammation but a persistent, systemic state of immune activation. By the end of the month, weight gain is the most visible and predictable outcome of this month-long dietary experiment. A standard burger meal is calorically dense and consuming one daily creates a significant calorie surplus. Over 30 days it would be common to gain 5 to 15 pounds or more. This weight gain would predominantly be visceral fat, the dangerous fat that accumulates around the abdominal organs. The increased body weight places additional mechanical stress on the body. Joints, particularly the knees and hips, must bear the extra load, increasing the risk of osteoarthritis over the long term. Sleep quality can also decline, as excess weight, especially around the neck, is a major risk factor for obstructive sleep apnea, creating another vicious cycle of poor health. Ultimately, the combination of weight gain and inflammation creates a powerful, self-sustaining cycle of metabolic disease. The visceral fat secretes inflammatory signals which promote more insulin resistance. After just 30 days, an individual has not only gained weight but has fundamentally shifted their body's internal environment towards one that actively promotes chronic conditions. The damage is no longer transient. The health consequences observed over these 30 days are not a new discovery. They are the modern manifestation of a dietary shift that began over a century ago. Historically, human diets were predominantly plant-based, rich in fiber, and low in saturated fat, refined sugar, and sodium. The Industrial Revolution dramatically changed this. A century ago, NAFLD was a rare diagnosis. Today, public health data from organizations like the World Health Organization estimates that it affects up to a quarter of the global population, with rates even higher in Western nations. This historical perspective shows that our physiology is not inherently flawed, rather, it is poorly adapted to the modern dietary environment we have created. Our bodies evolved in conditions of scarcity. Understanding this mismatch between our evolutionary biology and our current lifestyle is key to developing effective public health strategies, making mindful dietary choices more important than ever. The evidence from this 30-day journey is unequivocal. Consuming a standard burger every day for a month subjects the human body to a relentless, multi-pronged assault, resulting in measurable and significant harm. The process begins immediately with metabolic disruption and escalates systematically week by week. This exploration highlights the profound power of consistent dietary choices. It demonstrates that chronic diseases do not appear overnight. They are the cumulative result of daily habits that push the body's systems beyond their capacity to cope. The daily burger serves as a potent symbol of a dietary pattern high in saturated fat, refined carbohydrates and sodium, and low in fiber and essential micronutrients. From a public health perspective, the key takeaway is the importance of moderation, variety, and a diet centered on whole, unprocessed foods. While an occasional burger can fit into a balanced lifestyle, making it a daily staple creates a biological environment conducive to disease. Public health recommendations consistently emphasize diets rich in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and lean proteins. These foods provide the fiber, vitamins, minerals, and anti-inflammatory compounds that protect the body's systems. In conclusion, the shocking truth about 30 days of burgers is not found in a single dramatic event, but in the insidious, step-by-step degradation of the body's most vital functions. It is a powerful case study in the biology of chronic disease, illustrating how a seemingly simple daily choice can initiate a cascade of negative effects that compromise the heart, liver, gut, and overall metabolic health.